Let's jump into day 4, because we are talking about another very important thing that is a foundation of the method of the process. We're looking into specifically why we think that YouTube is the most powerful language learning resource that has ever been created in the history of mankind. Oh, hello? Can I advance? There we go. As we've been talking about for the last 3 days, learning a language comes down to thousands of hours of exposure to the language. And modern media makes that lofty goal not only possible, but downright enjoyable. Content is made to be fun and interesting. It's full of the regular language that people use every day, and there are millions and millions of hours available on YouTube, social media, and the countless streaming services. The core of the Refold method is to harness the power of modern media and use it to learn any language from anywhere in the world. There are 2 different key factors that help us learn from content. When things are fun and compelling, you learn faster. This ties into yesterday's attention lesson. If you're having fun, your brain will absorb things more quickly. And the second factor is comprehensibility, which I'm not even sure is a real word, but it's about how understandable the content is. If you can understand more, you learn more easily. When you learn a new word in English, you already understand everything around it, and so you hardly notice that you're picking up a new word. And so the more compelling content is, the faster you learn, and the more comprehensible it is, the faster you learn. So we're looking for this perfect balance between comprehensible and compelling. But not every person has the same comprehension level or interests, which means that you are going to need to find your perfect balance and then find the content that matches that balance the best. Now, how do you do that? The first step in the process is to rate yourself and figure out your tolerances for 2 different factors. We call these ambiguity and simplification. Ambiguity is when something isn't clear. In your case, it'll be when the language used is out of your reach, for whatever reason. Shows made for children use much simpler and clearer language than a dark, gritty comedy done in a super regional accent. That second one has a lot more ambiguity for a learner. We call this your tolerance for ambiguity. If you have a high tolerance for ambiguity, that means that you don't need to understand that much in order to enjoy yourself. If you have a lower tolerance for ambiguity, that means that you're uncomfortable or don't enjoy not understanding. So to be clear, it's not necessarily a good or bad thing on either side, but it's very important to know so that you can choose the content that best fits yourself and your style of being. Simplification is the other factor that has to do with whether or not you can enjoy more basic things. Some people are perfectly happy to watch a teacher walk around their office and slowly explain what color a box is, but other people find that mind-numbingly dull. To each their own. This is your tolerance for simplicity. If you have a higher tolerance for simplicity, you're going to be happy with more comprehensible inputs and beginner materials. If you have a lower tolerance, you're going to need to search out interesting stories or materials with more engaging visuals. So with those 2 different axes, we find that there are 4 general learner types. Type 1 is high tolerance for ambiguity, high tolerance for simplification. If this is you, you can use basically any content to learn from. This is the group that I'm in. Type 2 is high tolerance for ambiguity, but low tolerance for simplification. If you're in this group, you'll bias towards content made for native speaking adults, since you don't mind missing things, but you still want to be engaged by the interesting content. Type 3 is low ambiguity, high simplification. And if this is where you fall, you should look for more learner content since it will be much more understandable and thus match you better. And finally, type 4 is low ambiguity, low simplification. If you're in this group, you're going to have to use more willpower and techniques since no content will be interesting to you by default. This doesn't mean that you're out of luck, however. It just means that you need to choose content very carefully and increase your content level a little bit in at least one of the 2 factors. If not, you're going to become constantly frustrated with the language. We'll come back to this in a moment because this is the most common group. A lot of you probably fall into this group 4, this type 4. Now, you all might have an idea about what group you fall into, but you'll never really know without testing. You're going to have to try various types of content to see where you fit. And when you find something that's interesting to you personally, it may be difficult to get you to stop, which is what we're going for. Something to keep in mind is that things will also change over time. Your tolerance levels will change. You'll just get used to not understanding, and your tolerance for ambiguity will go up. The comprehensibility of the language will also change over time as you get better at the language, which means that something that you hate today might become your favorite piece of content in just a few months. So don't write things off completely just yet. Save them for a rainy day. Now, going back to the 4th learner type, most adults who've never engaged in this process are in this group: low tolerance for ambiguity and low tolerance for simplification. And that makes a lot of sense, actually. Most people have had years or decades of highly dense, interesting content being trivially easy to access. Any of you can sit down right now and watch a thrilling movie in English and understand every single word. So suddenly changing your level of ability can feel like a lot of color gets sucked out of the world. But these tolerances aren't static, and they're not traits that are intrinsically tied to your personality. There are techniques that you can use in order to increase your tolerances. The first is to give yourself a head start. And there are 2 ways that you can do this. You can rewatch or reread something you know super well in your native language. This lets you focus on the words, phrases, and ideas that you're already familiar with. And even though you're only understanding a small portion of the actual words, you can still follow the story just based on character names and scenes. This is a great way to revisit old TV shows or movies that you used to love but haven't seen in many years. Lots of people have enjoyed rewatching Friends in their target language. Number 2 is to spoil the plot, which is similar to rewatching, but it's for things that you haven't seen before. And you could just look up the plot summary before you start it. This is great for people who enjoy new things but still want to be able to follow the story. Lots of TV shows and movies have fully written English summaries that you can just use. Try Googling the title of the show and episode and then the word summary and see what comes up. The final technique isn't really a thing that you do in the moment to prepare, but it's about changing your mindset and being okay with the ambiguity or simplicity. If you think about all the reasons why this is so important to language learning, it can make it a lot easier to sit through 30 minutes of learner videos because you know that it's going to allow you to eventually do everything that you want to do in the chosen language. Remind yourself that the more you understand, the greater your ability becomes, and it makes it a lot easier to tolerate that sort of simple stuff. Now, we recommend that you start your immersion journey with YouTube. It's free for everyone. There's a ton of content that's being uploaded every single day, and there's a plethora of learner channels that you can just use. And once you've started using the account for a few weeks, the system starts to recommend you more content in your target language that it thinks you're going to enjoy. YouTube's goal is to maximize your time spent on it, and so we use that as a learning hack. All of this combined is why we think that YouTube is the #1 resource for learning. What should you do on YouTube, though? What content should you search out? That's a very good question, oh wise course participant. We recommend looking out for videos that are in the comprehensible input genre, where they use simplified language and visual context to make things easier to understand. Good comprehensible input has a few things that you want to look out for. If the speaker is going slower, using lots of visual cues, so maybe drawings or images or props or whatever it might be, if they include subtitles and frequently repeat words and ideas, that's good content. Bonus points if they also have a nice variety of interesting videos for you to watch. There's also plenty of content that isn't specifically made for learners, but happens to include a lot of visual context. We call this simplified content. These are a great second level if you want to branch out, or if the comprehensible input videos are too basic or too boring for you. These are things like travel vlogs or cooking videos. They're much simpler than how to take out a second mortgage, but they're still engaging and have real language. There's so much out there that I could talk about, but as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so a video then must be worth 10,000 words. And we have Cedar playlists that are full of a bunch of videos, and so those must be worth 1,000,000 words. These playlists have a bunch of videos in a bunch of different topics that you can just jump into in your target language. These are in the spreadsheet, by the way. They give you a great starting point for YouTube content. We recommend that you watch as many of the videos in these lists as possible to give yourself an idea of what's out there. And so check out the database and find the playlists for your language. A few quick notes about subtitles on YouTube. Don't use English subtitles or subtitles in any language that you already speak. You only want to be using the subtitles of your target language to help you understand more. Or occasionally check your understanding to make sure that you actually know what's going on. If you come across content that has subtitles permanently on the video, so you can't turn them off like this example here, you're going to want to cover them in some way. This is because if your brain sees English all the time, it'll just take the easy way out and you aren't going to learn very much at all. So covering it with something like a piece of paper or an external program can be very useful. YouTube also has auto transcription subtitles for most videos. These are not made by humans and often contain errors, mistranscriptions, and have no punctuation. If this is your only option, feel free to use them. But while they're not perfect, it's better than nothing, but don't rely on them as being a source of all-knowing truth. If you see something in the subtitles and you hear something quite different, you might very well be correct even though you're just starting out. Your homework today is a little more involved than the past few days, but it's still fairly straightforward. Your first task is to make a new YouTube account that is only in your target language. There's a tutorial video that you can follow that is linked to the spreadsheet as well as in the useful links channel. Then you're going to explore YouTube in your target language by using a Cedar playlist. Make sure to watch at least a few minutes of each video just to get an idea of what's going on. And finally, figure out what type of learner you are. As you're watching YouTube, think about what you're enjoying or what you're not enjoying, what makes sense to you and what feels hard and interesting. Once you think you know what type of learner you are, post it to the Discord and let us know what you learned about yourself. We're all here to support you and keep you going. But that's everything for today. Thank you very much for attending. And yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for day number 5.